husband served me divorce papers when I got back home after spending a night with his boss.
I never knew that one mistake would lead to me divorcing my husband and making my husband hate me forever. I thought that the friendship I had with my husband's boss was never going to be the problem, but it later cost me a great loss because I lost my husband and also my best friend. My fellow Redditors, my name is Mary and I am 30 years old. I am also an event planner, and event planning has been my passion for so many years. The name of my husband is Gabriel, and he is 35 years old and he is an architect. Gabriel and I got married about 3 months ago, and it has been great. Gabriel and I met through a mutual friend, and it was love at first sight. Gabriel was very charming at first, and I really thought he was just doing so in order to get me, but I was very wrong. Anne is one of my best friends. I met her in college, and ever since we have been together through everything. It was Anne's birthday party in summer last year, and like every other year since college, she decided to throw her usual birthday parties. I knew she could always go all out for those parties, and I always supported her. It was like every other day I was having lunch with Anne when she brought up her party that was coming up. As usual, we discussed the details, and I looked forward to the party like always. On the day of Anne's birthday, I got ready to attend, and I dressed to impress like always. I got to the venue, and I wished my best friend a happy birthday. She asked if I should go with her to say hello to the guests, and I accepted. It was such a lovely evening. Few hours into the party, I was already feeling exhausted, and I went to meet Anne, who was across the room when I ran into someone. I quickly apologized and left. I met Anne, and I told her I was leaving, but she insisted I should still stay a little. We were speaking when a man joined us. Anne proceeded to exchange pleasantries, and I was left standing. Anne later introduced us, and I discovered it was the same guy I ran into earlier. I apologized again, and Anne told me all about him, saying he was the guy she had been telling me about, but I knew she was just trying to set us up because I didn't know anyone like that. Anne left me standing with Gabriel, a guy I didn't know at that point, and I was very mad at her, but I knew she meant well because I hadn't been in a relationship in a while. Gabriel and I got speaking, and he told me a lot, but himself, and I asked him why I never met him, even when he was very close to my best friend, and he said that he normally sees me afar, but he didn't know if I was spoken for. I told him he could have just come up to me, but he never did until then. I told Gabriel I needed to leave because I had an event the next day. We didn't get to exchange numbers. I said my goodbyes to Anne, promising to meet up for lunch in a couple of days. The next day, I was booked for business because I had an event I was taking care of. I kept thinking about Gabriel because I had a very good evening with him. I knew some of the people at Anne's event, but his company was the best, and I later found out at that moment that I didn't get his number. I felt sad because I had thought maybe he didn't feel the same way. That's why he didn't ask for my number. I decided to just let it go and not worry over a guy who might not have any interest in me. The next day I met up with Anne and we talked about fashion like we always do, but she brought up Gabriel and I told her we were just talking at her event, that there was nothing more to it. And I also told her that it wasn't that serious because if it were serious, he could have asked for my number, but he didn't. Anne was surprised, and she went on to talk about how I shouldn't just wait for the guy to ask what I should have just given him. Anne, between the two of us, is the most forward. She could always get any guy she wanted. She always went for whatever she wanted. Anne somehow got my phone and dialed Gabriel's number before I could say anything to her. Gabriel picked the phone and I had no choice but to talk to him. I told him I was the one, and he was kind of surprised it was me because he wasn't expecting me to call, and I told him we never got around to exchanging numbers. We spoke for a few minutes and he had me out for lunch and I accepted. I ended the call and I didn't know what to do with Anne. I felt embarrassed. I called him because I didn't want to look desperate. But like always, we laughed over it, and I told her I had lunch with him the next day. That evening, I went to see my father. It had been a while since I knew we were repairing our relationship, because for a long time, I never knew who my father was, and at some point, I was able to find him, and I didn't know how to feel because I felt like he abandoned me. But instead, I discovered that he never knew I existed. He asked for a chance to be in my life, and I gave it to him. I didn't want to punish him for what he didn't know anything about. I had dinner with my dad, and he kept trying to be everything and more for me, and I appreciated it. I went home tired from a long day, and I slept off. The next day I went to work, and I met a couple who were planning to get married, and I was in awe. They were so in love, and I felt jealous because I wanted to have someone I could share my life with in that manner, but I didn't want to think too much into it because I usually overthink things and stress myself out. I finished with the couple and it was already lunchtime. Not long after that, Gabriel came to pick me up. He took me to my favorite restaurant. I didn't know how he knew, but I was sure it was the work of Anne. She had her name written all over it. Gabriel charmed me as usual, and we had a good time. He told me about how he had lost his family and how he had never been the same. I was feeling very sad for him because I knew what it felt like to not have any family. We finished our lunch, and Gabriel dropped me off, promising to see me later in the week. It had been a month since I last heard or spoke with Gabriel. I didn't understand why he could ghost me in such a way. I thought we were doing great. I tried to reach him a couple of times in that month and he didn't respond. I concluded that maybe he wasn't into me as I was. I also thought maybe I was too forward. Few days later, Gabriel showed up at my store and told me he had been busy with work and he was sorry. I understood because I knew how work can be. We went out a few times, and in those times we became very close. We went out on a couple of dates, and he finally asked me out and I accepted. I was finally his girlfriend. I thought he took his time though because I was expecting it for a long time. Gabriel and I dated for some months and our relationship grew into something beautiful. I met some of his friends and it was really lovely. Anne kept going on and on about how she was the one who brought us together. But I never gave her the satisfaction because I had always said she never really introduced prior to that day, and we had been attending her parties for years. I kept teasing her about it and she loved it. Gabriel proposed to me a few months later and I panicked at some point. I didn't know what to say and Gabriel gave me some time to think about it. I appreciated it because he was not trying to rush me and I was happy. I talked to Anne and she explained to me how Gabriel loved me and he could do anything for me. She reassured me and that was everything I needed. I said yes to Gabriel the very next day and he was ecstatic. We planned our wedding and it was beautiful. I never felt so much happiness. My dad had worked me down the aisle and I had never seen him so proud. After the wedding, Gabriel had asked me to move in with him, but I didn't know what to say. I had told him that we should look for a place together and make payment together, but I changed my mind because I was very busy with work after the wedding, because I had taken some weeks off. But seeing that house hunting could be another problem added to my work schedule, I decided that we move in together. We started living together and things were going smoothly. We could wake up together, eat breakfast before going to work. We had our regular dinners with friends and family, and I always felt safe around Gabriel. He was almost everything I wanted and more. He would listen to me and solve any issue I had. I was in the store finishing up a meeting with my client when Gabriel came in. He had told me his boss was having his birthday celebration the next day. I was surprised he was just telling me, but he said that it was just planned and it was a surprise party for him. I told him I didn't know his boss because he was not at the wedding and he said he was out of town for work then. I decided to go with him because I didn't want Gabriel by himself. I thought to ask Anne to get me something to wear, and like always, she delivered and I loved it. The next day, I got ready with Gabriel and we went to the party. We got to the venue and it was packed. Gabriel introduced me to some people and we talked for a bit. Things were going smoothly and I excused myself to go to the restroom. I finished up and headed back to my surprise. The birthday boy had already walked in. I couldn't see him because a lot of people had gathered around him. I went out to call Gabriel saying I had to leave because it was getting late, but he insisted I see his boss before leaving. I accepted, and not long after he came to find me. We went together to meet his boss and say happy birthday to him, but he was busy with some important people and Gabriel asked me to wait a few minutes. We waited for an hour before we were allowed inside. At the moment, I was very pissed because I had to ask myself why he kept us waiting for that long. It wasn't fair no matter who he was. Few minutes later, we were asked to go in and see him. I was already pissed, but I made up my mind to just forget about it because of Gabriel. On getting inside, I received the shock of my life. I saw Ross, my ex-boyfriend, who left and didn't say goodbye. I couldn't believe that he was my husband's boss. I told myself I wasn't going to behave like I knew him because it had been so long, and I am already married, so Gabriel introduced us, and I could see the shock on his face too. He decided to play along with us, not knowing each other, which was fine with me, because I wasn't going to put Gabriel in the position where he had to feel his wife and his boss had history. We said happy birthday to him, and we left the office, and I kept wondering about how Ross was my husband's boss, and how weird it was to see him again. The next day, my husband noticed my mood and he asked me about it, but I told him it was nothing. I wasn't going to tell him I had a kind of relationship with his boss. I went to work like usual, and I decided to take my mind off things and bury myself in some work. After a while, Anne came around and we talked about Ross. She was surprised about the dynamics, but I had to tell her not to mention anything to Gabriel, because at that point, I wasn't going to pursue anything with him. But my friend Anne warned me to stay away from Ross because I was married, and he was the one who had left me alone when we were still together. I took her advice because I wasn't about to destroy the marriage I had with Gabriel. A few weeks later, I was at home preparing dinner when Gabriel got back from work. We ate, and he had brought up this story of how we needed to attend their yearly gala organized by his company. I did want to go, but when he had told me I was going to be considered with organizing it, I was very happy because that could be a huge plus to my store. I was happy until he told me he had suggested it to his boss, and I had to go see him the next day to make some preparation, and of course ask him a few questions. I didn't want to lose the opportunity because of my old history with Ross. I made up my mind to go, and I thanked Gabriel wholeheartedly because it was a huge opportunity and he made it happen. I got ready the next day because I had an appointment with Gabriel's boss, so I had to ride to the office with my husband. We got there and he kept me waiting like usual, but I remembered I was only there for my store and I knew this event could put us on the map. I entered his office and we greeted each other and I got down to business, but he said he needed to attend a meeting and that we should start the meeting by lunchtime. I was very angry because I knew he was messing with me. I decided to tell my husband the latest development about how his boss wanted to have a private lunch with me to talk business. He didn't see anything wrong with that, and he had said I should be patient. I went back to the office and I got started with work because I knew after that lunch, I was going to be so angry. It was time for lunch and I wasn't feeling it because I was discouraged, and I knew it was just going to open old wounds. I got down to the restaurant where we were having lunch, and I saw that Ross was early for the first time since I met him. I sat down and we got to business. He had told me how he wanted the event to be, and I took every detail down. Ross kept talking about us, and I was feeling exhausted about it, and I made it clear to him he was the one who had left me. He told me he had a good reason, but honestly, I didn't want to hear it. But Ross was persistent, and he asked me to please hear him out, and I did. He had told me he was left with no other choice because he had to pick between me and his family. I know Ross loved his family a lot, but I didn't know why he had to pick. He refused to tell me, promising to say it on our next lunch together. But I had explained to him that I wasn't going to keep having lunch with him because I was married. But he told me it was a harmless lunch that my husband was aware of. A few days later, we started preparing for the event. It was a big event, and I needed more hands to help out. I employed more people, and it was moving smoothly. But I still had lunch with Ross, which I kept postponing, but I knew I had to get around to going because we were going over the last details of our arrangement. I went to lunch with Ross, and we finished everything. He apologized about what happened a few years back, and I was happy because at least it was past us now. We can concentrate on the event. The day of the event came and everything was set. I went to the event with Gabriel, and he was proud of what I had done with the place. Throughout the night, Ross kept staring at me, and I kind of found it weird, and when he came over to talk to Gabriel, his hand kept brushing mine. At some point, I felt like he was flirting with me, which was not appropriate. A few weeks later, Ross showed up at my store telling me he wanted to take me out to thank me for the event I organized, and I respectfully declined, but he insisted. I went out with him, and it was fun for us to have reconnected after a very long time. It was fun while it lasted. Ross kept sending me flowers after that day, and it was very nice. We talked on the phone for a few minutes in the day, and most days he had said he wished he had come earlier before I got married. He still loved me, and he wanted to make up for lost time. I decided to give him a chance in order for him to try. We went out for a few dinners, but I didn't see it as something that could harm my husband. But I knew I was lying to him, and I decided to stop. I discussed it with Ross about us telling Gabriel about us knowing each other, but he had said no, that it could complete things at work, and he didn't want to lose his best employee over what we had. I told him since we hadn't done anything bad, we should come out to Gabriel, but he refused. From that moment, my secret relationship with Ross grew. We kept seeing each other, and I became too comfortable. I felt like at some point my husband had suspicions about my late-night dinners, but he had thought it was just work. It was like every other day when I met up with Ross, and he had told me I should be creating enough time for us. I had to tell him I was married, and it could be very bad for either of us should my husband find out that we had been seeing each other secretly. But Ross kept asking for more time with him, which I gave in. Looking back now, I regret my decision because it had created problems for me. My husband and I started having issues, all because I wasn't at home anymore. And most days I wasn't at the store either. But I had to lie to him that I was busy with different clients and they were taking my time. He believed me for some couple of weeks before Ross had gone out of town for a business trip. I wasn't happy because I found myself to be missing him. I made plans for Gabriel, and I should go out for dinner since we had been having issues for some weeks now. We reconnected and everything was okay before Ross returned. I went back to see him, and at some point we ran into Anne at a restaurant. I didn't know what to say because she had warned me to stay away from Ross, but I didn't listen to her. She pulled me aside and he told me I was making a big mistake going out with my husband's boss, but I didn't listen to her. I told her it was nothing. I went back to meet up with Ross, and I didn't know that Anne had already gone behind my back to call my husband to the restaurant. I didn't know Gabriel came in secretly and saw me and his boss together. Ross took me to his house, and we spent the night together. The next morning, I saw Ross sleeping naked beside me. I felt like I had committed a big sin because everything that Anne had said to me was true. I was going after someone who did not care about me, someone who had abandoned me. I quickly got ready and I went back home to my husband, planning to apologize to him and tell him everything that had happened. But I got home to see that Gabriel was very angry at me, and he already had the divorce papers signed. He didn't allow me to explain anything. He was very curious with me. I begged him to listen to me, but he said he could have considered forgiving me if I didn't sleep with his boss. I felt horrible because he kept guilt-tripping me, and I felt worse. Gabriel asked me to pack out of the house, and I did. I shouldn't have been deceived by Ross, who left me when I needed him, and when he discovered I was married, he came and ruined my marriage. Updates. Hello, guys. So I signed the divorce papers, and Gabriel and I are officially divorced. It was very exhausting. I was not happy because it took a great toll on me. I lost my husband due to my foolishness. I was happy in that marriage, and I knew that my husband loved me, but I went after someone who I wasn't sure of. I heard that Gabriel had resigned from work and he has started his own business. I was happy for him. And through everything that was happening, Anne had come clean to me that she was the one who sold me out to my husband. At first, I was very furious as to why she did that, but she said I was going to a place I wasn't going to come back from. I understand she was only doing that for me to see I was throwing away my marriage for someone who wasn't worth it. But looking back now, I wished it never destroyed my marriage. Ever since that night and everything that happened after, Ross hasn't called me. I tried calling him a few times, but he ghosted me. That had made what I did even worse because I lost both sides. My relationship with Anne hasn't been the same ever since. I lost all contact with Gabriel. I am now staying with my father, and he has been very supportive. I couldn't have gone through this without his support.
Hello, fellow Redditors. I find myself in a deeply distressing and confusing situation that I need to share. Recently, I discovered my wife was cheating on me with a man, her doctor to be precise. Overwhelmed with emotions and searching for some form of justice, I decided to video call AP's fiancé to expose their actions. Let me share the details of my shocking discovery and seek your advice on how to navigate this difficult time. During the video call, AP's fiancé was shocked and devastated to learn about the affair. She thanked me for bringing it to her attention and expressed her gratitude for my honesty. Now, I am grappling with the aftermath of this revelation and need guidance on how to handle the situation moving forward. First, some context. My name is David, 45, and my lovely wife, Mia, aged 33. My wife and I have been married for 6 years and have been through ups and downs, as any couple does. We had been trying to have kids for the longest time that I can remember, but all in vain. We had consulted various doctors and explored different fertility treatments, but unfortunately, none of them were successful. It was due to the ages we were in that we faced difficulties in conceiving. We realized that age can play a significant role in fertility, especially for women over 30. Despite the challenges we faced, we never lost hope and continued to support each other on this journey. I could see that my wife was slowly going into depression with the realization that we might not be able to have our own kids. We researched and educated ourselves about alternative options such as adoption or surrogacy, keeping an open mind to different paths to parenthood. Eventually, we made the decision to pursue in vitro fertilization (IVF) as our last attempt to conceive a child. I had brought the topic of adoption a couple of times in front of my wife. She vehemently dismissed it. My wife had been adamant on not to go the adoption route as she wanted a baby that was actually a part of her. She believed that the biological connection was crucial for her to fully experience motherhood. Despite her strong stance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment as I yearned to start a family and provide a loving home for a child in need. Days went by without much progress on the kids' front. We started losing hope. Just as when things were going south, I was trying to find ways to cheer my wife on. I entered my house one day, surprised at the loud music blasting from the speakers. The rhythmic beats filled every corner, making it impossible to ignore. Curiosity piqued, I followed the sound to find my wife dancing energetically in the living room. She motioned me to join her. As I joined her in the impromptu dance party, a wave of joy washed over me. The infectious rhythm and my wife's carefree movements instantly lifted my spirits, creating a moment of pure bliss in our humble abode. We fell onto the bed, tired and sweaty. We looked at each other and broke into laughter. It had been so long that we enjoyed ourselves. The weight of the world seemed to lift off our shoulders in that moment, as we relished in the pure joy and freedom of laughter. It was a much-needed reminder of the importance of taking time for ourselves and finding happiness amidst life's chaos. As we caught our breath, I asked her what the occasion was. She propped herself up, brimming with radiance. She pulled out a brochure from the side table and showed it to me. She started speaking so fast in all her excitement that it was difficult for me to comprehend and keep up with it. I asked her to breathe and make me understand. She said that she had been researching a lot of fertility clinics in the past months. She finally found one that could yield some positive results in our case. She looked so happy and elated that I did not want to ruin her spirits with my pessimism. We agreed to check it out over the weekend. The day had come when we were to visit the clinic. Though it was too far away from where we lived, I did not mind driving because I knew it was for a good cause. As we embarked on the journey, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation and hope, knowing that this visit could potentially bring positive changes to our lives. After 3 hours of driving with a few pit stops, we finally arrived at the clinic. The clinic stood tall and welcoming, its modern architecture blending seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Stepping out of the car, I could sense a mix of nervousness and excitement in the air, looking forward to this new adventure. We were asked to wait for a while until the doctor made himself available. During the wait time, we were given a bunch of papers to fill in details and what we were wishing to fulfill with our visit today. A file was made under our name and sent over to the doctor for initial review. The papers included questions about our medical history, current symptoms, and any medications we were taking. Additionally, we were asked to provide our insurance information and sign consent forms for any necessary procedures. Once the doctor received our file, they would have a better understanding of our needs and be able to provide more personalized care during the visit. After what felt like a few hours, we were shown into the doctor's cabin. We were greeted by the doctor, who introduced himself as Patrick. He was a very young and handsome doctor. A little too young to be called an expert in the field, that was just my thought. As he began to examine us, I couldn't help but wonder if his youthful appearance would affect his ability to provide proper medical care. However, as he spoke confidently about our symptoms and asked insightful questions, my initial doubts started to fade away. He made us run through the process that he felt would be the most effective in diagnosing our condition. He explained each step thoroughly, ensuring that we understood the purpose and significance of each test or examination. Additionally, he took the time to address any concerns or uncertainties we had, further instilling trust in his expertise. We felt quite reassured and without a thought agreed to go ahead with the procedure. We started with our treatment immediately. We gave them the necessary tests to determine the best course of action. Once the results were in, he tailored a treatment plan to address our specific needs and began administering the appropriate medications. We were asked to check in after a month to see any changes in our body. During the check-in, he thoroughly evaluated our progress and made any necessary adjustments to the treatment plan. Additionally, he provided us with valuable guidance on lifestyle changes that could further enhance our chances of conceiving. A few sessions into the treatment, Patrick had excused me from attending the sessions. Going forward, it would be just my wife who would be required to check in, as she was the one who needs to be physically healthy to conceive. I was to continue taking the same medication going forward. Patrick had determined that my presence at the sessions was no longer necessary, as my wife's physical health was the primary focus for conception. From that point on, my role shifted to providing support and ensuring she stayed on track with her medication regimen. I trusted Patrick's expertise and understood the importance of prioritizing my wife's well-being in our journey towards starting a family. I did find this a little weird, but I was willing to take any steps that could help us start a family. As days progressed, my wife started spending more and more sessions with Patrick. She seemed to be enjoying his company and finding solace in their conversations. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy, wondering what they were discussing that she couldn't share with me. My wife reassured me that she has been seeing a lot of positive changes in her body through the sessions that had been planned by Patrick. She said that these sessions were actually helping her overcome some physical discomfort she had been experiencing for a while. As her partner, I wanted to support her in any way I could, so I decided to trust her judgment and give the doctor the benefit of the doubt. I still felt that she was praising him a little too much for my comfort. However, I understood that she was going through a difficult time and needed to feel confident in her choice of doctor. Despite my reservations, I chose to respect her decision and be there for her every step of the way. However, I never imagined that infidelity would become an issue in our relationship. Suspicion crept into my mind when I noticed my wife's unusual behavior and secretive phone conversations with Patrick. Initially, she would come home and discuss in detail about each session that she had been to, what were the tests conducted, how it went, and how she felt after each session. Gradually, the details started declining and she shared less and less with me. I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease as her communication with Patrick seemed to increase while her openness with me dwindled. It was as if a wall had been erected between us, leaving me questioning the true nature of their relationship and the reasons behind her sudden change in behavior. Unable to ignore my gut feeling, I began investigating discreetly. I started paying closer attention to her schedule and noticed inconsistencies in her whereabouts. Additionally, I discovered unfamiliar text messages and social media interactions that raised further doubts about her faithfulness. As I delved deeper into my investigation, I stumbled upon a series of late-night phone calls she had been receiving. The secretive nature of these conversations only intensified my suspicions, leaving me even more convinced that something was amiss in their relationship. It did not look like an ordinary patient-doctor relationship. The hushed tones and hurried exchanges during these phone calls hinted at a hidden agenda, raising questions about the true nature of their connection. The doctor's involvement seemed to extend beyond professional boundaries. In a fit of desperation, I considered confronting Patrick himself, but I ultimately decided it would be more impactful to involve his fiancée. My reasoning was that if someone alerted me to my wife's affair, I would appreciate the heads-up. With that in mind, I found his fiancée's contact information from the unending chats that were exchanged between them. I saved it on my phone and waited for the right moment to disclose this. As days went by, I couldn't shake off the feeling of guilt and uncertainty about my plan. However, the thought of potentially saving someone from heartbreak and betrayal kept pushing me forward. Later that week, my wife informed me that she has an appointment set up for another session with Patrick on Friday. I tried to act cool and wished her the best for her session. Also told her that I hope we can see some positive results soon. She gave a hug and said that surely soon we will probably have good news to share. Feeling a mix of anticipation and curiosity, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of breakthroughs my wife might experience during her session with Patrick. I was waiting anxiously for Friday to come by. Just like every day, I waved my wife goodbye and left for work. I hid myself in the next block so that I could follow her around once she left the house. As I watched her drive away, a feeling of unease washed over me. I did not have the heart to witness something that might break my heart. I followed her car through a safe distance, making sure that I remained unnoticed by her. Instead of taking the highway towards the clinic, she took a turn that led towards a different path. I was puzzled by this and nevertheless followed her. She made a stop at a park and got out of the car. I stopped my car at a distance and observed. She seemed to be waiting for someone as she kept looking around anxiously. After a few minutes, a man approached her and got into the car. It was none other than Patrick. They started kissing each other, fondling each other's bodies with a passionate intensity. Their desire for one another was palpable, as if they had been longing for this moment for a lifetime. The car became a sanctuary for their love, enveloping them in a world of shared intimacy and unspoken promises. He started undressing her, and that's when I decided that I can't take it anymore. I was shattered and heartbroken. I decided to call Patrick's fiancée and make her witness what she was unaware of. I dialed her number and got out of the car. I started walking towards my wife's car. She picked up and was puzzled to see someone she did not know. I pointed the camera towards the back of the car from where she could see clearly what was happening in the car. Both Mia and Patrick were unaware of my presence and busy with enjoying each other. As she watched the live footage, her expression transformed from confusion to shock and disbelief. The realization of their betrayal hit her like a ton of bricks, leaving her speechless and unable to comprehend the depth of their deception. It was her scream that brought them to their senses as they realized what was happening. My wife quickly grabbed her top to cover herself. I disconnected the call and started walking towards my car. My wife quickly dressed herself and ran out of her car towards me. She said that she did not mean to hide things from me. All she wanted was to have a kid of her own. But looking at our results, it was impossible to have a baby by ourselves. Patrick suggested that he could help us in this situation. I could not believe that this is the kind of help he suggested, and my wife of 6 years had agreed to such an absurd plan. He is a doctor, for God's sake. How could he suggest having sex with a patient and getting her pregnant without getting caught by her husband? Did she not trust me enough to take my help and discuss this with me so that we would be dealing with this phase together like always? And how would they be able to explain the sexting and the nude pictures that they were sharing with each other? I could read through the bullshit they were trying to throw at me. All I wanted was for them to accept that they were both cheating their partners and having an affair behind their backs. Now I find myself in a whirlwind of emotions, uncertain of which steps to take next. My trust in my wife has been shattered, and rebuilding it seems like a daunting task. Part of me wants to seek separation or divorce, but I also can't help but wonder if there is a possibility for healing and resolution. I love my wife. I know that she was blinded by her desire to have kids, but that does not give her the right to have an affair with a doctor. It just makes me sick thinking about it. So, dear Redditors, I turn to you for advice, support, and guidance. Have any of you experienced a similar situation? How did you navigate the emotional roller coaster that accompanies such devastating betrayals? Should I consider reconciliation with my wife or seek a legal separation instead? How can I trust her again? And, in the case of a potential future with her, what steps should we take to rebuild our relationship? Please share your insights, personal stories, and suggestions. Your advice could make all the difference in helping me make a well-considered decision. Thank you for taking the time to read my story and for any input you may offer. TLDR, discovered my wife's infidelity with her doctor, so I decided to video call his fiancée to expose their affair. Seeking advice and guidance on how to handle the aftermath, whether to consider reconciliation or separation, and how to rebuild trust in the relationship. Any personal experiences or suggestions are highly appreciated. Update: a few months have passed after the revelation of the affair. It was a difficult phase. Both parties involved in the affair had to navigate through a range of emotions, including guilt, anger, and sadness. I cannot still wrap my head around the fact that my wife would agree to such an absurd arrangement with a stranger just to have a child of her own. Patrick's fiancée requested to meet me in person to thank me as she was appreciative of the honesty with which I had shown her his true colors. She mentioned that she had noticed some red flags in his behavior lately but had no concrete evidence until my call. We had a lengthy and emotional conversation about our shared experiences, pain, and the future we now both face. She expressed her gratitude for shedding light on Patrick's true character, as it helped her make an informed decision about their relationship. We discussed the importance of trust and how we can support each other moving forward, knowing that we both deserve happiness and fulfillment.